welcome back to my ukulele songbook playthrough. Today we're going to do the next two songs in the book, Anchors Aweigh, which is the US Navy Hooray song, and Anytime by Herbert Lawson. Here we go. We're going to start with the chords from Anchors Aweigh. G, E minor, D7, C, G diminished, A7, and D sharp diminished. The first playthrough of this song, I'm going to take a little bit slower than you may normally play this song. And that's because in the very last line, there's a challenging chord progression, G, E minor, G sharp diminished to E minor, back to G. Each of those chords come on one beat. And so you're having to change every single one, and that can be challenging. So I'm going to take it slower for this first time. And in the instructional, I'm going to show you a modified version, something a little bit simpler if you're having trouble getting from that E minor to D sharp diminished. So here we go. Here we go, the first playthrough. 1, 2, ready, and stand, baby, out to sea, fight our battle cry. We'll never change our course, so fish us, go steer shy. Roll out the TNT, anchors aweigh, sail on to victories, and sink their bones to Davy Jones, hooray! So as I said before, there's a part in this song, there's actually two challenging chord progressions, but the first one isn't as difficult as the second one, so I'm going to leave it the way that it is, and I recommend just practicing, and what I'm referring to is in the second line, the G to G diminished to D7, G to A7. It's not a challenging chord progression. None of those chords are challenging on their own, but the speed going through them one at a time, where each chord gets one beat or one part of the bar, that might be challenging. So I recommend just kind of going through those chords one at a time. Here, we can do it together. So G to G diminished to D7 to G, and then to A7. I'm only going to work on the first four chords, that G, G diminished, D7, G. And what I'll do is we're going to play them 2 times through those 4 chords, and we'll do 2 times through, and then we'll speed it up, and we'll do it a couple of times sped up. So G, G diminished, D7, G. Again, G, G diminished, D7, G. And we're going to speed it up. 1, 2, 1, 2. G, G diminished, D7, G. Again, 1, 2, ready, and G, da, da, da. One more time. 1, 2, ready, and G, G diminished, D7, G. So I recommend practicing that chord progression a few times through. Now we're going to go on to the other challenging one, and this one is one I'm going to actually modify just slightly if you're having trouble doing these 4 chords in a row, especially up to speed with the song. So it's G, then E minor, and then a D sharp diminished, and then back to E minor, and then back to G. But we'll just take the first 4 chords. Now, one thing that I'm going to do with this one is I'm actually going to cut out the first E minor. So I'm going to play G just for 2 beats. So G, G. So instead of doing that E minor, I'm going to cut it out and just play the G. It's not going to change the sound too much. It'll change it a little bit, but the G will still work. Then we're going to change the D sharp diminished, and we're just going to lift our pinky up so that you can keep the G shape and just move it up. Each finger goes up 1 string, so you can keep that G shape that you've made and play it on the top 3 strings. So far we've done G for 2 beats, and then we've moved this up to that. Now what's happening here is we're doubling that A, and we're getting rid of the C that was in that chord. It doesn't change the chord a whole lot. It's still a D sharp diminished. It still has all the notes that you need for that D sharp diminished, but we've made it a little bit easier on ourselves. So G for 2, then D sharp diminished, and then we'll do the E minor. That one I'm not going to change. We'll just have to practice going back and forth. So G, G, D sharp diminished, E minor. That's what those 2 bars are going to sound like. And each one is going to get, well, the G is going to get 2 beats, and then the D sharp diminished 1 beat, and the E minor 1 beat. So 1, 2, 1, 2. And then we go back to the G right at the end. So it's going to sound victory and then back to sick your bones to Davy Jones, and then so on. So let's practice that a couple of times. So a little bit slow to start. 1, 2, ready, and victory, and 1, 2, again. Let's go. Victory, and 1 more time this speed. G, G, D sharp, E minor. Now let's speed it up a little bit. 1, 2, ready, and G, G, D sharp, and E minor. It's hard to say those chords really fast. 1, 2, ready, and G, G, D sharp diminished, E minor. 1, 2, 1 more time. There you go. And then we'll go back to the G. The other thing I'm going to add in this tune is all happening really in the last line. We're going to add a tacit on the G and the D7 for Sink Their Bones to Davy Jones. You actually heard me play it in the first playthrough. I jumped the gun a little bit, but it's going to go sink their bones to Davy Jones. And we've done this before. It's kind of a palm mute. So I'm muting the strings after I play the chord. So I'm going to play the chord and then mute the string right away, and then just sing the words over it rather than playing over top of it. So sink their bones to Davy Jones, hooray! So there, I just added a little kind of oomph to those 2 last bars. And then the last, the G, hooray, we're going to add a 1, 4, 1 on that. So hooray! And those are just 1 beat each. Remember that this song is in cut time. So when I say 1 beat, I'm counting the half notes. So 1, 2, 1, 2. Those are the half notes. If we were to count the quarter notes, they would go much faster. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. But because we're counting the half notes, I'm just counting 2 per bar. So the G, C, G is going to go 1, 2, 1, 2. And that's going to be the ending of the song. So that whole last line, just to recap before we play through one more time, the last line is going to go victory and, so there's your 4 chords. Then we're going to go sink your bones to Davy Jones, hooray! And that's what I've added to the song. So I'm going to do that one more time all the way through without stopping. So victory and sink your bones to Davy Jones, hooray! And that's the whole thing. So now we're going to go back to the beginning and we'll play through the whole thing. 1, 2, 1, 2, red. Send Davy out to sea, fight our battle cry. We'll never change our course, so vicious foes steer shy. Roll out the TNT, anchors aweigh. Sail on to victory and sink their bones to Davy Jones, hooray! The chords for any time. A7, D7, G7, C, C7, F, F minor, and E7. It starts on beat 3, so I'm going to give you 1 bar for nothing, and then 1, 2, any, and your first 2 notes, any. So, a 1, 2, a 1, 2. Anytime you're feeling lonely, anytime you're feeling blue, anytime you feel downhearted, that will prove your love for me is true. Anytime you're thinking about me, that's the time I'll be thinking of you. So anytime you say you want me back again, that's the time I'll come back home to you. Anytime your world gets lonely and you find true friends are few, anytime you see a rainbow, that will be a sign the storm is through. Anytime will be the right time. Anytime at all will do. So anytime you say you want only my love, that's the time I'll come back home to you. So I'm going to add a couple of things here to this song. The first thing we're going to add is a strumming pattern. Now the strumming pattern that I'm doing is basically the sort of basic default strum that most people do: down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up. But what I'm adding is a little bit of emphasis on the 2 and the 4, the beat 2 and beat 4 of that pattern. So all I'm doing is making a little bit more, or giving a little bit more strength in my forearm to give a little bit more of a heavier sound in that, on those beats, and everything else kind of ends up being a little bit lighter. So it'll sound kind of like this: down, down, up, down, down, up, down. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pa, pa, pa. And I'm just playing that same pattern all the way through. The second thing I'm going to focus on is the ending. So both the ending of the first time through, the first verse, and then the ending of the whole song, so the second time through. So in the ending of the first time, we're going to add a turnaround chord. A turnaround chord is generally used to kind of create a little bit of tension that says, oh, this song is not quite done yet. We're going to do something more. And I thought that this would be a good place to put one, because right now there's just a C. I'll come back home to you anytime. And there's no indication that you're going to continue the song. There's no indication that something else is going to happen. So traditionally, a turnaround chord is usually either a 5, so in this case it would be a G7, or a 2-5. Can also be used to create that tension. So this is what that will sound like. I'll come back home to you. There's the G7. Anytime. Sounds perfectly fine. But I'd like to add something a little bit different, because I think it sounds a little bit more interesting. I'm going to add an E7 instead of a G7. Now an E7, the reason I picked this specific chord is because the E7 is the 5 of the chord that follows. So the A7, the E7 is the 5 of that chord, A, B, C, D, E. And this will create even more tension to go into that A7 chord. I'll come back home to you anytime. So we create that tension and then we resolve it into that A7. And I think that sounds a little bit more interesting than the G7. Both totally work and are totally fine. Or you can just also still play the C. That's okay too. But in this situation, I'm going to add the E7 on the last bar. So it's going to play 4 beats of C and then 4 beats of E7. So it'll be 1, 2, anytime. So you'll have to still come in with the words any on beat 3. Okay, so that's the first ending. The second time we end, we're going to not play that E7 again, so don't play that again. And we're going to add a different ending. On this last beat, or on the last bar, sorry, we're going to add in a G7 and C. Actually, it's going to be C, G7, C on the last bar of beats 1, 2, and 3. And even though there's only 2 beats in that bar, we're going to sort of add that extra beat at the end just to kind of end it off. So, so those 2 bars in total will be 4 beats of C, C, 2, 3, 4. Then the last bar, C, G7, C on beat 1, 2, and 3. So the whole ending will be, you are only my love, that's the time I'll come back home to you. 1, 2, 3. And then we got our ending. So just to recap those 2 things, we've got a strumming pattern, we've got an ending at the first time through of the C and then to the E7, and then that moves into the A7. And then we've also got the very, very end, C, C, G7, C. And I think that that's probably enough for this song. So let's go on to the last playthrough. So here's the last playthrough of Anytime. A 1, 2, a 1, 2.